Hello out there, my friends. It is I, Hondo Onaka. Now you know what to do. You must tune in to my favorite podcast, the Five-ish Fangirls. Otherwise, there could be consequences.
The tangents as we continue all the way to episode 334 of the Five-ish Fangirls podcast. And if Chauncey's here, that only means one thing. We're here for Metallica. What else?
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Five-ish Fangirls podcast. So glad you could join us. Let's start off like a direct with a virtual table and see who's joined us this week.
This is Brittany and Troy.
This is Holly from Wisconsin.
This is Rachel in Indianapolis, Indiana. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Chauncey here in Indy too.
Yes. Chrissy should be jumping in shortly. Hopefully. So, but yes, Chauncey is here.
It's been months and months.
It has. It has been a
And, like,
while.
We've been in like the same apartment, stuck here, like in total isolation for months and months.
Yes.
And yes, but
The last
I
time
think
we really got to go out, we saw Metallica. How appropriate.
Yeah.
It turns out we're going to go see Metallica again, but we'll get into that. First up, well, I would say the news, but we don't have any news.
Okay.
So, been kind of quiet, actually. So, yay. I guess.
No news, good news.
No news is good news. We'll take that.
Yes.
So, but we do have some feedback from Shalane. So we'll make sure to do that real quick. So Shalane says she too is excited for Ghostbusters Afterlife. She is excited for Win Wolfhard. He was great in Stranger Things and Carmen Sandiego plus Paul Rudd, because everybody loves Paul Rudd.
Yeah.
It says she also thinks it's cool that movies that we love, like Star Wars, Jurassic Park, and Jumanji, are getting sequels, letting the next generation join in the fun. She also says Loki was so awesome and really enjoyed it. Owen Wilson was great in the series and all those multiverse Lokis, especially Alligator Loki. Chauncey's very confused because he's not caught up at all.
Oh boy. Basically, you're gonna have to rectify that pretty quick.
I know. I'm just going to sit him down and tie him to a chair and make him watch all the Disney Plus stuff. She also says, did you guys know that Tom Hiddleston plays Captain Hook in one of the Tinkerbell movies? Says if you haven't seen them, go see them. They're a little cheesy, fun, but cute. She likes them. He appears apparently in the Pirate Fairy, which I guess makes sense, playing Captain Hook. She's also excited for season 2 of Loki. Can't wait to see what happens next. She also said she's been watching the X-Files and really enjoying it. She's also been apparently deeping diver into Star Wars and learning about Emperor Palpatine.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm kind of going back into my Star Wars stuff too, and yeah, the 2 books I've got on my reading right now is the last of one of the Thrawn newer trilogies by Zahn and Darth Plagueis. Which leads into Palpatine.
Yep. There's plenty of material out there.
There is. And there's more to come.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then she finishes up with a question is, she asks if Kenneth Branagh is in our names in the hat. And off the top of my head, I don't remember. He probably is, though. Odds are he is. So yes, we will talk about him whenever his name comes out of the hat.
Yeah. Or if you're not sure, Rachel, just add him in. And if we pick him again, then we know, oops, you had him in there. We had him in the voice.
Yeah. It's like off the top of my head, I don't know for sure, but I've also added a whole bunch of names This is a lot, like right before we did it the last time, so I can't remember them all. So, because every so often I'll look at the list and I'm like, why isn't that person on there? So, yeah, like what were we thinking when we first did this? Why has this person been not included? So yes, the names in the hat are always being updated.
Yep.
As life goes on and we discover more people. So, so that is Shalane's feedback. Thank you, Shalane, for that. So guess we will move on to this week's main topic. And the reason that Chauncey is here is because as we're recording this 3 days from now is going to be the 30th anniversary of what is affectionately known as the Black Album. Officially, it's called Metallica, but everybody just knows it as the Black Album. So, and of course, we can't talk about Metallica without Chauncey being here.
This is pretty surreal. I mean, it's like just, being on the Five-ish Fangirls, talking about the Metallica album, the Black Album.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy because I've been a fan.
Yeah.
I've been a fan since the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah, we this is something that we started doing, I think, really in like the last year with the pandemic, when looking for different topics, interesting topics, and doing these kind of album, singling out a particular album of an artist that we like, and really getting into it, and obviously Metallica, they've got a pretty good discography, although not as extensive as some other artists, considering they've been around for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
But they really went on like this tear in like their first 10 years, because they're getting ready to celebrate their 40th anniversary, hence Chauncey and I going back to San Francisco later this year. Thank you. Thank you, ticketing gods, for that.
Thanks to Rachel, because I didn't actually win the opportunity to buy tickets even as a Metallica Legacy Club member, and Rachel got in.
Yeah. Well, when you have 2 fan club members in the house, it doubles your odds.
Odds are pretty good.
Yes. But it is kind of funny that, he's the legacy member, he's the one he was in the club back when you still had to pay for it and stuck with it, paying for it until you didn't have to pay for it anymore.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, the noob is the one that gets drawn and be like, congratulations. Now give us lots of money.
You went to your first Metallica concert in 2008, so I wouldn't call yourself a noob, but yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of new fans that just got into them like this year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I was saying, you look at their discography. If you're talking just studio albums, don't bother with like the S&Ms and Lulu, which we're not even going to talk about. Just their studio albums. The Black Album was their 5th studio album in less than 10 years. So they were cranking them out there for a while. But then after that,
crankety.
Yeah, but then after that, they've just been like, we'll release. They did Load and Reload 96, 97, and then nothing until Saint Anger, and then nothing till Death Magnetic, and then it was 8 years between Death Magnetic and Hardwired. Right. So
there's a lot of good reasons for that. I mean, this is what I got from being a Legacy member. Was I read the magazine. They had a magazine called So What, which is based off a old punk song that they cover, and they would do like interviews in that magazine that wouldn't show up on the internet or TV, and you could get like an insider view. And if like the reason for it was like for the first 10 years was they were the unit, right? They had basically had the people in the band that were to get them off the ground, and then they had gotten rid of 2 or 3 people. One person quit, fired one. I think the other one just had something else to do. And then it became the 4 that we all kind of know about, the original Metallica, which is James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Cliff Burton, and Kirk Hammett. And then Cliff was killed in a bus accident around the
86.
well, it was the middle of the Master of Puppets tour, right? So
Yeah.
Essentially you have like this calamity that's in the middle of their momentum is what caused them to slow down, right? And then the other thing that slowed them down was this Black Album, as we'll talk about it, is they were completely blindsided by the fame and money that came their way because of the song Enter Sandman. So yeah, we'll get into that. But that slowed them down big time.
Yeah, for a lot of people, this album is for it, depending on who you ask, as far as fans are concerned. But I think the general consensus is this is the album that made Metallica kind of go mainstream, because Enter Sandman just blew up.
Yep.
And suddenly they were just everywhere and not just in like the metal. Before it's like you had to be like in the metal.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like there was a time when that was like, like if you have your favorite, insert here, punk band or rock band that's like from your hometown that you may have gone and seen, in high school or grade school, like several times, right? And like the crowd is only like going to fill a club of like maybe 50 people to 100 people, and then you see them 5 or 6 times. Just imagine that for like their first 2 albums. I mean, Ride the Lightning, they were really filling like arenas and stuff, but like the point is there was an era of Metallica that was from like 81 to 84 where you could see them in a club and it was no big deal, and you could see them 10 times over, and ticket prices were like less than $10 or whatever. So this album took them to the point where they played in an airfield in the Soviet Union to 1 million people.
Wow.
Yeah, and even now this album is it's still breaking records 30 years later. I mean, it's their best selling album. It debuted at #1 in 10 different countries and spent 4 consecutive weeks at the top of the Billboard 200. It was their first album to do so. It's one of the best-selling albums worldwide. It's also one of the best-selling albums in the United States since Nielsen sound scan tracking began. It's certified 16 times platinum by the RIAA in 2012. It sold over 16 million copies just in the United States. And it was the first album to do so when they started doing that Nielsen sound scanning. So,
and that's not to mention now how many downloads and or
well,
illegal
and
downloads were made.
It last year it was ranked number 235 on Rolling Stone's 500 greatest albums of all time list. In December of 2019, it became the 4th release in American history to reach 550 weeks on the Billboard 200.
Wow.
Yeah. You look at the Billboard 200, and obviously the top, you're like your top 10-ish is going to be all your new releases. But if you bother to scroll down to the lower half of it, it tends to be the long-standing albums that people just, new generations discover and buy. And there's a lot of titles there. And it cracked 550 non-consecutive weeks, which is just over 10 and a half years.
We should do this, since We'll do this
It's
too.
fourth in history. So the first is Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. Which
wow.
Yeah.
I want to introduce a concept here. So like there's another podcast I listen to called Metal Up Your Podcast, and it's an all Metallica podcast. And every time they talk about Metallica as a group, especially if it's like a new topic, they'll ask people to tell like their origin story of Metallica. How did you ever even learn of the band and the music, and what they're all about as a bunch of artists. So like we can do when Chrissy joins, like ask her, but like any of you, like I don't know, start with Holly. How do you know about? What was your origin story with Metallica? How did you even learn what the heck these artists were all about?
Funnily enough, it was with Enter Sandman, but not the album itself. The parochial school that I went to for elementary had a talent show, and one of the girls in my grade got up the courage with her guitar and came out and did Enter Sandman.
Wow.
All by herself. Yeah.
That was the first time.
That was the first time. And then jump a few years later and listen some more to the classic rock stations that were starting to put Metallica in. And then the whole thing with Napster and that. And then I'm just like, okay, I'll check these guys out. And like, okay, hey. And I remember my dad picking up the S&M album with the symphony orchestra from Metallica, and just I was blown away. So yeah, that's my intro story.
Rach?
Well, that's your fault. You're my origin story.
Surprise.
We started dating. He's like,
yeah, but like, what was your?
What do you know about Metallica?
Right?
And I was like, Enter Sandman. And even then, I like barely knew the words.
Wait. Let me ask you this then: if you knew Enter Sandman, what was it about that song that stuck with you?
I don't know. It was just.
See, most people say it's the part where he says, "We're off to Never Neverland."
I kind of like, you played it for me. You played me like greatest hits, and I was like, I don't know that one. I don't know that one. I don't know that one. And then you got to Enter Sandman. I'm like, that one sounds kind of familiar. And it was probably just from the radio. Probably from just flipping channels in the car, because it's not like I purposely had not that we have a hard rock station now in Indianapolis. They're alt rock. Used to be that they were the heavy metal station, but now it's like you can hear Metallica and then like Mumford and Sons on the same channel. Like, yeah, that's not metal. Sorry.
Yeah, but those beards, they just look so hardcore.
Yeah.
So cool. Like a coal miner's beard.
Yeah. So I just knew it just because, it's been used in popular culture, because it became so mainstream so fast. And so I just, heard it from.
And that bass line from Enter Sandman, though, it left an impression.
Mm-hmm.
And the ominous, and just how low Hetfield could go. It was like, chills down this, going down the back of your spine.
But so Chauncey gave me like the greatest hits playlist. I'm like, and then he started playing them whenever I was in the car with him, and half the time I'd end up falling asleep because he was usually on like a trip to his parents or up to the cabin in Michigan. So it's a long car ride. He'd be like, hey, let's play some Metallica. And I'm like, somewhere between him taking me to my first show in late 2008, when we were just dating, we weren't even engaged yet. And the entire time I'm like, when are they going to play the one song I know? So here we are 13 years later, and I'm like, I'm entering to try to get tickets for the show in San Francisco, and like, okay, I'm gonna go buy the tickets for the show in San Francisco now. So,
you want to get on the hotel reservations?
Like, you want a room with a king size bed or two queens?
Whichever's nicer.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that. And now I'm sitting here wearing one of my Metallica t-shirts from when not from when we last saw them, but last time they were in Indianapolis from 2019.
Chrissy joined us. Hi, Chrissy.
Hello.
Chrissy.
Yes. Family issues popped up, but nothing that was too hefty, I guess.
Yeah.
But yes, hello. I am here.
We're doing
We're telling
origin
Chauncey
stories.
our Metallica origin stories. How did we discover Metallica?
I don't really have much of an origin story. I heard Enter Sandman a lot.
There we go.
And it's over.
See?
It's very well. The reason I've heard it a lot is because it was used a lot in anime music videos. Probably still is, but it was a really popular one when I don't know if amvia.org is still a thing. But one of my favorite ones is oddly enough, it's a Sailor Moon AMV is showing the end of the first season, where it's like, and it like gives it a really dark and scary tone to the whole thing, even though it is a scary episode where everyone dies basically. But yeah, that's my most vivid memory of that is a Sailor Moon AMV. So I'm probably not the person to ask about Metallica things, so I'm gonna sit back and listen and enjoy.
Maybe learn a thing or two.
Maybe
Yeah.
learn a couple of things for sure.
What about you, Brittany?
I don't really have like a forced memory because, like I was saying before the show, my mom was a fan and so was my dad. So I just basically grew up listening to them
Sure.
because I'm gonna make everyone feel old, but the Black album came out when I was 1.
Right.
So,
Well, this band is turning 40 years old this year, so I mean, it's spanned a lot of people's lives.
Mhm.
mhm.
But just the fact that out of 3 of us, 3 of the 5 of us were all like, "Oh yeah, Enter Sandman." That just tells you
In
what
various
this,
incarnations.
just what this album did
Yeah.
as far as pushing Metallica to the mainstream. If you weren't part of like the metal like underground, then you
Sure.
probably didn't know who the hell Metallica was until this album, and then Enter Sandman was released as a single, and it just went.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, thanks to
Mhm.
podcasts, I'm starting to realize there are like actual generations of fans that are, if you claim to be a Metallica
Yeah, I think Brittany's
fan,
the only generational one of us, actually.
well, I mean, there's some people that just absolutely love what they quote unquote call the old stuff, and then there's like the '90s Metallica fans now, and I mean, lots of
Yeah.
people. Obviously, it's equal opportunity; everybody can like whatever they like, but it's
Mhm.
interesting to me that I can meet a person if the conversation steers towards Metallica, I can almost like understand where they're coming from, their perspective, depending on like what they like, right? I finally started to find people that are like big time '90s Metallica fans, and I think as time goes on, we'll actually start to hear more about like the Renaissance Metallica fans, when Metallica went back to their roots in the 2000s to kind of play back this '80s style of thrash music, where they weren't trying to be mainstream like they were in the '90s.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's fascinating to me to hear how people even know about them, even if it is just, I was at Pizza Hut and I heard Enter Sandman one time. It's fascinating to
It
me
played on
because
the jukebox at the local Pizza Hut.
right.
Mhm.
Well,
I
like
was
the
busy
Beatles
playing
were
Dr. Mario.
Cable.
Yeah.
like everyone talks about the Beatles in terms of just their effect on like
Mhm.
just popular music, because it was a transcendence thing, right? You set something in motion in terms of just kind of being unadulterated, be your style, right? And it was like the Beatles kind of just brought like this unique generation of style to popular music, and then Metallica did the same thing, but it wasn't as appealing, right? Because it had such a heavy attitude to it. But that was also
Mhm.
what made it really attractive to a lot of people, because like music is, and it can be sort of like a nice like release, right? It's like when you're really really angry or something like that, or you're really really frustrated, or you just want to like be apathetic, like there's certain types of music that lend your ear sort of a helping hand to sort of set your mind down that path, and Metallica definitely does that for people. Like there's a lot of like um mythos written into their their songs, whether the way they sound or just the way the lyrics are written. And then when people interview Metallica and they ask like, "What is this song about?" It's a lot like the Beatles, where Metallica will just say like, "Oh no, it's up to you. Whatever the song's about, we really don't want to assign a meaning to it." And that's really nice because then you have an ownership of what you felt like when you connected with a song, and no one told you that you're not allowed to feel that way. So that's another thing that's neat about the Black Album is that it was like a nice time right before the internet when popular culture all of a sudden sort of adopted this really fringe thing, right? So it's like Guns N' Roses was huge, but that's still somewhat mainstream in terms of the style of writing and just like the spectacle they're trying to put out there. But Metallica was like nothing before it, right? So like you had like Led Zeppelin and Ozzy Osbourne before that, but they were just counterculture, rock and roll, sort of like drumming up what some of the rock and roll people were doing in the 60s. Whereas Metallica was like, let's be like precision guitar playing monstrosities on stage, in terms of like the spectacle. And like the other part of it was that them as people, they were still young. Like they were still like not even in their 30s. Like that's one thing. If you look at any of the any of the videos of them playing live during the Black Album days, James Hetfield has like a full beard and like hair down to like his back, and you look at him
Almost
like
a Fu Manchu mustache going down to equal the hair.
And for most of the tours, he's like in his 20s.
I look like that
still.
sometimes if my hair gets really frizzy.
Like if I showed you a picture of like the Wizard of Oz, lion style facial hair of James Hetfield during 1991 or two, like you'd be like, that guy's like 40 years old. But no, he was like 29.
He looked a lot older than what he actually was.
Well, here's the thing: is he had lived one hellacious life, right? And that's what's reflected in the music. This poor guy, like, basically was brought up in like what's not Scientology, it's called like Christian Science, and like his family rejected medicine, right? So his mom died of cancer and he was very young and he just kind of watched it all happen, and then his dad abandoned him and the rest of the kids. So he was like just basically like life took one parent away and then the other parent took themselves away. So I mean, what else does this kid have to do but to like just rage against the world? And as a deep Metallica fan myself, like you come to realize that like in his art, he's kind of come full circle. Like now he's like a father. He clings to his family and like just makes sure everything is happy and peaceful. And like the music itself is actually now about more like togetherness and taking care of yourself and mental health and stuff like that. Whereas in the 80s, it was about death and destruction and abandonment.
Rock and roll!
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty deep stuff. So, but the Black Album was a like, I don't know if you guys can indulge me here for a second. I'll give like a little bit of a timeline like thing. So like in 88 through 89, they have already grieved and kind of not gotten over. They never really got over it when Cliff Burton died, but like they had kind of gotten past the grieving to the point where they could function.
They could, move on,
and
live life.
They had this new bass player in Jason Newsted, and they just started hazing this guy real bad, but he would put up with it because he was a fan that had gotten the gig to be in Metallica. So their new bass player was one of their own fans, and that bothered him. But he had tons of energy, and he brought a lot to it. And a lot of people still claim that Jason is their favorite bass player in Metallica. Anyway, so when they kind of got over that stuff and they started making their album in the late 80s called And Justice for All, it was it was like a departure for them for like the message. Like the past albums had been about sort of like H.P. Lovecraft stories or like sort of abstract stories about being trapped under ice or just what heavy metal music is typically about. Whereas And Justice for All had more of like a rage against the machine kind of feel to it, like rage against the government and the economy and all this stuff. Well, they made a video during that for the song One, which is about this book called Johnny Got His Gun. And like, that's when people started calling Metallica a sellout because they used their presence on MTV to market themselves. They actually had a in the
Yeah, I guess
VH1
that's the other thing too. Sorry to interrupt, but kind of an aside, because MTV is just now celebrating a big birthday.
Yeah.
So the fact that MTV was starting to become a thing at this during the same time also made a huge difference too.
And Metallica wasn't beholden to themselves, right? They had a record deal with Elektra Records, so like they kind of still had to play the game. Now they've bought in the rights to all their stuff, and they can do whatever they want. But back then they didn't.
Because how dare you use your art to pay the bills?
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, you're coming from an era of like underground metal fans that saw you in
Right.
clubs, and they feel like you're their band. And then when you go on mainstream MTV and you're becoming more nationalized, they actually had an interview where James Hetfield said a fan came up and just spit on him because he made a video. I was like, man, all the way in the like 1987, they were that mad about just being sold out, right?
How dare you make a music video so I can see your faces?
Yeah. The reason I bring all this up is because there's like it's this we've seen this now a few times in Metallica's career, which is there's this phase change in what they are as a commercial artistic operation, right? They've gone originally from sort of like this pure thrash metal underground thing, and then the Black Album as it transitions becomes more LA. And what's interesting is Metallica actually moved to San Francisco in the early 80s, like in like 81, to escape what LA was, which was glam rock. Okay, so this is them returning back to LA. I guess I shouldn't say that the Black Album was. They returned to LA to record And Justice for All, but again, they're kind of going back to the bank, if you will, the place where the music capital of the world is happening, right? And anyway, the producer for the album is Bob Rock, and Bob Rock is Canadian and was actually based in Vancouver, so they recorded a lot of the stuff and worked on it in Vancouver. But anyway, Bob Rock was talking about how he had, he produced like Bon Jovi and he had his own bands and stuff like that, and he was not a metal person. But I was telling Rachel this the other day. There's an interview he gave where he was debating whether he wanted to take the producer gig to produce Metallica, and he saw him live, and he was still on the fence. And then one day he was driving through the desert, like I don't know, going between some places out west, and there was a hitchhiker on the side of the road, a young Native American kid wearing a Metallica t-shirt, just hitchhiking on the side of the road. So that was his sign. He was like, okay, I'll do it. And he went ahead and signed the deal and became the producer for the album. But the thing is Metallica
it was
couldn't
not
really
a smooth road.
right. They couldn't before have ever sort of afforded to work at a studio like what Bob Rock was providing, right? So he was nowadays, like Bob Rock would have been like, I don't know, like Rick Rubin, like their producer that they had for the Death Magnetic album, which is like a Johnny Cash former Johnny Cash producer and all this. He's a high end guy, in terms of the industry. But what he told them was, he goes, I've seen you guys live, and you never produce on an album the sound that you actually sound like live. And have any of you ever just like sat down and like just played the Black Album into a pair of headphones, or at least like Enter Sandman into a pair of headphones, and felt how heavy that song sounds? Just got a lot of like width and depth to it in terms of like its mix and production. And that's Bob Rock teaching them how to layer songs together, like in terms of like multiple guitars at multiple different layerings to sort of fill out the entire range of capability for hearing that a human can have, and giving you this sense of weight, and implying things with sound rather than saying them with lyrics, right? The whole Black Album itself, even if people like can't stand the music, I've heard friends of mine at university say like that album sounds so good. Like they don't care for Metallica, but they're like just the production work, it sounds so good. That's this Bob Rock guy. That's what he brought to it. And like they went there's some like anecdotes about when they made this album that were really interesting. Like they were trying to get this song "Sad But True," which is everyone claims that's their heaviest song, to sound even heavier. And Bob Rock goes, why do you tune your guitars to E and do it like that? And he goes, or why do you use that note as your lowest note? And James Hetfield goes, well, that's as low as my guitar will go. He goes, well, all you have to do is tune your guitar to a lower note and you can play lower notes. And that was like, we're Metallica's 4 albums in. This is their 4th album that they're producing. They didn't even realize that they could tune their guitars to drop D, which is just a little bit lower than what typically guitars are tuned at. Okay. So they were very inexperienced as musicians. They were very experienced as like putting forth their artwork. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you meet a producer, they kind of do like a little bit of a health check and like, are these people, really in the know in terms of what they're exuding as musicians, right? So they were learning new things. Like they asked a couple times, how can we make that bass sound heavier when he slaps the bass? So like Bob Rock literally went with them to a guitar store and like they bought a 12-string bass guitar for the song Wherever I May Roam. There's this really
nice
loud part at the beginning after the sitar where you hear this whom on the bass, but they had to go buy a 12-string bass guitar just to get that one note for that song. And then anyway, like I'll tell a little bit of stories about the songs, but you guys can interrupt me wherever I want because I don't want to fill out all the time on the
Hey, no,
episode.
that's why you're here.
That's why you're here, because I'm like, well, I mean, I really don't have that kind of connection to Metallica or the Black Album or anything like that. So we bring on an expert to discuss these things. Because
if any other Metallica fans find this by like searching through the airwaves, I started like my origin story with Metallica isn't from the 80s. Like I was a young person in the late 90s and I got on Napster, right? The whole cliche of downloading Metallica on Napster.
Sorry, Lars.
Napster, LimeWire, that was the old standbys.
Prior to that, I had heard Metallica mentioned by my cousins on MTV, and that was it. And I was like, what? That sounds like a really cool word, but I don't know what it is. And that was it. And then I think it was 97 or 98, probably 98. I was on Napster, and I think I downloaded Metallica because on MTV I had heard the song Unforgiven 2, and I was like, I like that song. So I started downloading their other stuff. And actually the first time I heard Master Puppets, I was like, I didn't understand thrash music like I do now. I didn't enjoy it. I was like, I don't know about this. And then when I think one evening I went to Meijer with my mom while she was grocery shopping, and I bought the Symphony of Metallica album, and I sat in the car with my Discman Sony, and I just listened to that whole album just staring out the windshield, and I was like completely in awe, right? And after that, I bought the VHS tapes to watch the full concert at a friend's house, and they had surround sound, and it was mixed in surround sound. And it was like I was so into Metallica after that, it was insane. So, but yeah, so like I'm not like as the fandom would call me an OG fan of the band.
But you're not old enough.
I like to play one on TV.
Well, even some of their stuff off of the Garage Inc., where they covered like Bob Seger's Turn the Page and Queen's Stone Cold Crazy. When I heard them do Stone Cold Crazy, it was just like, holy crap, that's good.
Yeah, I think they told Bob Seger, that's an awesome song, and we wish we would have written that song. Yeah, because they haven't toured. They've toured probably more than most bands, but not the most, right? So I the other day I was searching for like how many live concerts different people have had, and like if you search for somebody like Tom Petty, he's got like just tons and tons, like thousands. Metallica's only played live like they're almost to like 1,650 times live.
But it's the number of people at those shows that's ridiculous.
Yeah. And the other thing is the distance they've traveled, right? So like they actually played in Antarctica. They actually played in the North Pole. They actually played, in like a Roman Coliseum. They've actually played, basically every stadium that's out there that you can think of. There's just so many like random weird locations that they've chosen to play just because they can, and they're adventurers, literally. Like they've turned their art into a corporation, but they've stayed true to themselves, and they love whatever they do, and that's what they always try to sort of maintain. So I would definitely not be surprised if they, if they're still up rocking, trying to get up on one of these or suborbital, things and playing up.
It's
in
only
space
a matter of time.
Yeah.
They did.
It's not when, it's if, or
Yeah.
but when, something to that effect.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So the song
but-
"Enter Sandman."
Yeah.
I just want to. I'll kind of go through some of these songs and place.
Oh, we go. We usually when we do these, we just go right down the track list. So.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So, I mean, jump in with any thoughts you have. But "Enter Sandman" to me is actually not a song I listen to that much. I've heard it probably too many times, and I sometimes I will find it and appreciate it for what it is in terms of the riff. And if you ever heard the word riff before, that's just essentially a thing you do with a guitar that kind of catches people's ear. It's usually meant either for the masses, or it's meant for guitar players, or it's meant for like other artists within the genre. That's how riffs are sort of targeted, depending on what they're doing. And James Hetfield is like the riff master. Like that's all he does really well. What, Rachel?
I was gonna say the one thing with Enter Sandman is like as much as I appreciate it more now, but these days if you're seeing Metallica, Enter Sandman is actually sad because it means the show's over, because that's been their show closer for how long?
Oh wow!
So you go and see them and you hear Enter Sandman and it's like, oh, the show's over.
Don't play that riff just yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. They'll usually play an encore after it, like Seek and Destroy is usually their closer now after, or the encore closer, I should say.
No, Enter Sandman has been the encore closer.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I haven't paid attention to the set list in a little while. So.
Yeah. You're just like, I'm here for Metallica. Yeah. Enter Sandman means the show
Rachel's
is
here
over.
taking notes of the set list.
Yes. Well, because I just remember, because like the first S&M Battery was actually the closer for the encore, which was that was 1999. But I was like, oh, that's interesting. It was really weird to watch a Metallica concert and not have Enter Sandman close out the show. So
yeah, they actually even as a band, they are beholden to that song, and it's not their favorite song. In interviews they'll say, we play it, but we really like some of our other stuff. But it's totally different, right? Because if you're playing it, it's more fun to play certain songs.
Yeah.
But
it's not the song that gets the crowd. Well, I mean, the crowd's always excited, but it's not Master Puppets. Whenever Master Puppets starts, as soon as that song starts, I'm just like, and the crowd goes wild.
Yeah, so if you ever go on YouTube one night and look up Metallica live in Mexico City in 1991, that's when they struck out on tour on their stadium tour, and they played in Mexico City, the Black Album, for the first time. And especially if you listen on headphones, the crowd, when they kick into the louder part of the beginning of Enter Sandman, is louder than the PA system. You can't even hear the band because the crowd goes so
It's
crazy.
like the Beatles.
And I mean, it's a metal band, for crying out loud, and the crowd.
Yeah, I know, but it's like that was the Beatles' problem, is they couldn't hear them. They could not hear themselves over all the screaming girls.
Yeah. So the second song on the album is "Sad But True," and this is that song that starts off with the da 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 da, and then it just kind of, you have this like this sort of awkward pause, and then you hear the drums go and then it kicks into like the really heavy da 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 da. Well, anyway, when they play that live, I mean, they're like stomping on the stage, and it's really heavy, really loud, and that's the one song they always start with, where they ask the crowd, that do you want heavy, and like that's the whole theme of that song is just as heavy as you can make it sound. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. That's a fun song.
It's a concert staple too. That's one you could
Mhm.
almost guarantee you're gonna hear.
Yeah, I like that song particularly with Kirk Hammett because he has a really kind of nice couple fancy little solos in there, but he plays a Randy Rhoads style flying V, which is where the little like the little pointy parts of the flying V. One of them is shorter than the other, and Randy Rhoads is a really famous '80s guitar player that used to be in Ozzy Osbourne's band, and he actually died in a plane accident because he tried to fly his plane through a barn. Yeah.
Oh boy.
He was a wild child. But
That's
yeah, that's
putting
sort
that
of an
mildly.
homage. It's sort of an homage. The Randy Rhoads style Jackson Flying V is a really famous guitar amongst guitar players that do guitar solos. It's a really lightweight guitar. The song "Holier Than Thou" was kind of like one of those songs that most people aren't even going to recognize from the album. It's one of those like when you listen to an album, it's like maybe the least recognizable.
I think it's
song
my
on the
least
album.
favorite on this album.
Yeah,
It
It's
is.
also
It's kind of forgettable.
it's the shortest song on the album too. So.
Mhm.
Yeah, wait, 3 minutes and 47 seconds. That's like a traditional any other song on
Yeah.
on the radio.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, that's the short one on the album.
So you know what's really funny about that song, Rach, is Bob Rock, because if you listen to Metallica in the '80s, they're all about thrash, and
Mhm.
thrash metal is just really fast, really tight, precision music with yelling on top of it and drums and but Holier Than Thou starts off with a thrash style intro, okay, and because of Metallica's just rise to fame as they were, Bob Rock actually wanted that to be the single for the album. He was not voting for Enter Sandman or any of the other songs. He wanted Holier Than
Shows
Thou.
what he knows.
Yeah.
Mm.
Isn't that crazy?
The band vetoed him on this one, right?
Yep.
The record company.
They completely outvoted him.
Hard.
So the story goes that Tommy Lee from Motley Crue was visiting the studio, and he was in the studio and they were playing Holier Than Thou, and he was just loving the sound of the intro, just how heavy and thrashy it was. And Bob Rock saw that and respected Tommy Lee, so that sort of maybe biased him towards saying that probably should have been the lead song of the album. So glad it wasn't.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
So the next song is called "The Unforgiven." I think it's the longest song on the album. It's close to its
Second to
longest.
longest.
Yeah. Now, if you would have asked James Hetfield in during this era of Metallica what his favorite Metallica song was, he almost always said this was his favorite song. Okay,
I know it's one of
And-
yours.
it's definitely one of mine. There is a trilogy, right? So that's so weird, right? We have trilogies in movies, but now in Metallica's lore, we have The Unforgiven, The Unforgiven 2, and there's The Unforgiven 3. So he made a trilogy of songs. And if you were to dissect the lyrics, he never really explains what songs are about, but the dissection goes like this. It's like The Unforgiven is about, can I forgive the world for what happened to me? The Unforgiven 2 is, can I forgive another person for what they did to me? And the Unforgiven 3 is, can I forgive myself for what I've done to the world? Okay. So it's this like really interesting exploration of the concept of forgiveness through like a really passionate, ballad, really. It's what the song is. Because when Lars was designing the song with James, they were laying it out in the initial sort of naive idea of like, what if we made a song where the choruses were really light and melodic, but then the verses were super heavy and aggressive, which is completely different than what most people do, the opposite. So if you ever listen to Unforgiven, consider that. They kind of inverted the intensity of the choruses and verses.
Well, and just the callbacks too, because they'll have the song and then part one, and then do it a couple songs, and then you'll get that nice acoustic, and then okay, we got another part of the trilogy.
Yeah. Plus, I don't know if you've ever really keyed in on the guitar solo in The Unforgiven. It's in my opinion probably Kirk Hammett's best guitar solo for the entire
I love it,
catalog
yeah.
of Metallica. Yeah, it's one of those things where in the documentary, it's called A Year and a Half in the Life of Metallica, where it covers them recording this album. It's just these couple VHSs you can watch. Like during the time when they were trying to get this solo written, Kirk Hammett was under a lot of pressure from the producer Bob Rock and Lars. They're like, "You've got to do your homework." They kept repeating that to him, and they kept pressuring him to the point where he just got so frustrated and got really mad. And then this is the solo they recorded. Was when he got really angry and frustrated, and he did a good job. So
Yeah.
I don't know, passion breeds passion, I guess.
Yeah. Well, like during this time, like what was it? Lars, Kirk, and Jason were all having like marital problems.
Yes.
I think is what
Yep.
I read. So like, they had a lot of personal stuff going on in the background, which you can see some of that in the documentary. So
It's interesting that 3 out of the 4 members were having marital problems, but James was actually going through sort of a different thing. Like he had a very serious relationship, and then that ended. And actually, the woman that he had written a song for, that was his previous relationship, he had written with a 4-track recorder in a hotel room for her, and then they broke up. Well, that song became Nothing Else Matters, which is number 8 on the album, which I skipped ahead.
Wow.
So, yeah. And during this album's tour, when they finally went on the road, he met his now wife, Francesca, and they've been together ever since. So James, I mean, being a child of abandonment, he's not really taken too keenly on having lots of relationships. So as far as we know as fans, like he's only been in like a few, and then he got married and he stayed with that person the whole time. So, it kind of makes sense for a guy that's been through what he's been through. So, the song "Wherever I May Roam" is all about touring. So
I love this song.
that song,
one of my
starts
personal
out with
favorites. It may be about touring for some people. For me, it's just about living life and exploring, and the need to like wander and experience new places and new things. There's one line in there that just gets me every time. It's towards the end. It's like, come upon my stone, like your gravestone. It's like my body lies, but still I roam. I'm like, that's so gonna be me. Like I'm gonna be wanting to like travel even when I'm dead.
That's awesome. Yeah. I sometimes I purposely don't read Metallica lyrics at all because I like what Rachel just said. Like I didn't realize that song struck her like that, and it's kind of cool to go back and see that because it's like, wow, that's neat. I didn't even know that lyric was in there.
This song, just the wanderlust that just speaks to me.
Yeah,
on so many levels.
The sort of the definitive version of this song, if you ask me, is I think what Kirk Hammett has cited in an interview is the definitive version. If you listen to the 1999 S&M album where they play with the symphony, for some reason it just really works with the symphony, this song.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the neat thing about Wherever I May Roam is it's meant to be really heavy, but it starts out with a sitar. So, yeah.
Hey, you know what? A lot of things that not just Metallica did on like this album, but other artists have done throughout time. You can go back and thank the Beatles.
Yep.
Yeah.
And George Harrison, hey, let's put some sitar in this album.
Mm-hmm. Let's just title the album after ourselves and just make it one solid color on the front.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of
hidden rattlesnake, or I think it's a rattlesnake.
Yeah, it's the "Don't Tread on Me" like you see on military. Yeah.
I saw some kid had a funny, silly illustration of that snake, and it says it was looking like the flag as the yellow background, but it was like a kid drew the snake, and it says, "Don't step on Snick, SNEK."
He's a snake.
Snake.
No step on Snick.
There's a an interesting little thing that crosses across this whole album, which is that when Bob Rock was putting together the percussion stuff, he liked where it was going with the Western theming. So like there's some imagery they put in with the sitar, but then they put in some acoustic guitar in The Unforgiven, and it has a Western feel to it. And so literally Bob Rock went out and grabbed a whole bunch of different percussion things like rain sticks and rattlers and all kinds of things you might hear in a spaghetti Western, like Eno Morricone song. And he just put it on a table. And if you watch the documentary, Lars is just kind of going through and exploring, and they just layered in like several different little instances of these random instruments, and you'll hear them in Wherever I May Roam and The Unforgiven most prominently. They're definitely in other songs on the album, but like that gives a feeling if you listen to this album beginning to end, like on vinyl or something. It has like a Western desert kind of feel to it. Like there's Miley Cyrus has covered Nothing Else Matters recently, and a lot of people are asking like, what's this music video about, that she made for it? And I think it's just imagery. Like it's all in the West. It's a cowboy or a desperado of some type journeying through the desert. And honestly, I mean, that's not more of a nail on the head piece of imagery for this album than anything else, in my opinion. If you listen to this album and kind of study it like I do, it's like it has a very Western feel, and I can't really put my head
that's what I
around
got from it too. Yeah.
This next song we were just kind of joking around about the snake on the cover, the Don't Tread on Me.
Snake.
This was in the early part of the 90s, right? So taxes were a big discussion point in the 90s. I don't know if people remember hearing, I think it was George Bush Sr. talking about no new
George
taxes.
H.W. Bush.
Yeah.
So, do my best Dana Carvey, read my lips. No new taxes.
So not only Metallica having some sort of political, influence into the album, you also have Megadeth at the same time, which is Dave Mustaine's band, which is actually what started out as a revenge band against Metallica because they kicked Dave Mustaine out. He actually went as far as to take the recording of George H.W. Bush saying that and put it in one of his songs during this time. And that Megadeth album that came out at this time is also one of the most famous metal albums of the era. But yeah, anyway, just an aside there. It's kind of interesting that the zeitgeist, everybody was talking and thinking about that kind of thing.
And it hasn't died down since. If anything, it's become even more applicable.
Oh yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. Well, there's just oodles and oodles of political, music out there. But it's interesting that Metallica, which, they pride themselves in staying pretty neutral, for almost all sorts of things like that. They actually did sort of change things up a little bit there. Even though, I mean, And Justice for All definitely isn't neutral. I'll just say that. But the rest of everything is. The Don't Tread on Me song, it has a very military style beginning.
That's what I always equate Don't Tread on Me with, because isn't that the Marines or something like that?
I think it's just like a libertarian sort of identifier.
It's the Gadsden flag. It goes from the American Revolution. So it's it was originally back in the 1700s protesting taxes and lack of representation and things like that. So, and it's been adopted, like you said, since then by groups protesting more taxes and being not heard and being not represented or being all those kinds of things. It really hasn't changed. It's times change, the message stays the same, basically.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of music history, that's why I bring all that up, is because of the timing of the early part of the 90s. We were gonna also invade Iraq and stuff like that. So there was the worry about the draft coming back because Vietnam was only a couple decades before then. So then we come to the sort of the hidden gem of the album, which is also sort of like the crux of the album, which is a very heartfelt ballad called Nothing Else Matters. Right? So
Through the Never is next.
Oh, never mind. I skipped over Through the Never, which is probably one of my favorite intros to a song. the beginning of Through the Never. Rachel, play it if you can right now and editing later.
I'll just let our
Oh my
listeners
gosh.
go and play it. I'm not gonna. I don't want to get in copyright trouble with Lars. So.
Got it. Well, if you're ever in, the central Indiana area and you see some guy in a Subaru with his windows all down blasting Metallica, this might be the riff I'm playing, because I just like to rewind this one over and over and over again. It's one of the best ones to listen to in the car, in my opinion, from this album. It's fun. It's just fun. So
also ended up being the title of their movie.
That's what I was about ready to say. Yeah. So at one point in Metallica's career, when they had really sort of scaled back to the top of the mountain financially in 2010, 11, 12, that era, they said, you know what, let's invest a lot of this capital back into the band. Let's make a movie, because Lars loves movies. Like, that's his thing. Like, if you had to go through hobbies of the band members, Lars is all about art and film, and James is all about sort of like adrenaline rush and having an amazing time outside. And so they kind of combined that and made this spectacle called Through the Never. So it's a concert film, and they based it off of famous concert films like Pink Floyd had done in the past, and Led Zeppelin had. The Song Remains the Same. And they said, how can we do our flavor of that, right? So we wanted to blend a story and imagery that goes with the songs, but also this amazing stage that they built, this gigantic monstrosity of a stage they put in Quebec, Canada. And they played there in another place, and they kind of edited the parts together. But they, on stage, had a giant toilet that came down from the ceiling. This was to harken back to the early 90s, when their first album, which was entitled Kill 'Em All, was actually originally titled Metal Up Your Beep. And I'm on the Five-ish Fangirl, so I'm going to censor myself.
Metal up your bunghole.
Yeah, there you go. And the front of the album was a toilet with a sword coming out of it. That was their first album cover. Well, the record company said, no, you can't do that, you crazy 16-year-old kids. And they said, all right, well, that's you stupid record company people. We're going to call this Kill 'Em All, and we're targeting you. Kill all the record company, the producers, So that's the angsty 16-year-old kids, doing that. So anyway, they had that. They also had, from Ride the Lightning, an electric chair, a giant fiberglass electric chair with metal all over it. And they had Tesla coils to actually produce real lightning up above the stage. They had crosses that would rise from the stage to sort of create the aesthetic of the front of the Master of Puppets album. They had Doris, the giant statue that you would see on the front cover of Injustice for All. And as they play the song,
who do I tweet to ask for Doris for the concert, the 40th anniversary concert?
Probably, let's see, Lars himself.
I want to see Doris and watch her fall apart.
Yeah, so they created this statue of Lady Justice from an album cover, and as they play the song, she crumbles and falls to the ground. It's justice
falling apart.
And then let's see what else they had. They had James Hetfield's Hot Rods in the movie with like a
this was after Death Magnetic. So did they have the coffins?
I can't remember and Through the Never they had the coffins. They might have. They definitely had video screens.
Yeah.
So all kinds of imagery to kind of tell their whole lore, their story of their touring, and different stories they've told throughout the years. But it's all really just a celebration of themselves. They're America's band. They, whether America wants them or not, they've been there, and they're still here. So Through the Never became their concert album that hopefully kids that get into metal find. I think was the whole design, and say, oh wow, this is really cool, and wonder about the lore or mythos of Metallica. Because that's the way the story was kind of written and put together. They don't explain anything. There's a thread of a story going through the Never movie where there's this roadie kid, intern, I don't know what you want to call him, has to find a bag and bring it to the band because they need it, and they never explain what's in the bag the whole time.
It's like Quentin Tarantino.
Mhm.
It's like Pulp Fiction. What's in the briefcase? Nah, I'm never gonna tell you.
And they even at the end go so as far as to put the bag on the stage with the band, and the band's playing with nobody in the stadium, and the bag just sitting there, and then that's it. So put what you want in the bag. And that's I guess the whole message they've said for years about their music is put whatever meaning you want to this stuff, because it's more important that you have a connection with it than it is for us to tell you what to think. Now we can talk about Nothing Else Matters.
Yes.
Which my favorite anecdote about Nothing Else Matters is what Jim Brewer, the comedian, talks about with it is. He's like, yeah, he's like, I tried to get my wife into Metallica, so I started, he started out easy, play her the soft songs, like Nothing Else Matters.
This is the closest Metallica has to a love ballad.
Yeah, right. They're like, Jim Brewer makes the joke. He's like, yeah, then my wife is like, I kind of like that song. He goes, yeah, see, they mellowed, they've changed. Come with me to the concert. And then the whole joke of it is that she goes to the concert and Slayer opens for Metallica, which is
boy,
it's like my first experience.
Right? Yeah, Rachel's first show, the opening bands were like full on like Lamb of God and the
screaming death metal. It was awful. So Metallica was like a reprieve when they came on the stage.
Yeah, I'm not really into that kind of stuff either. I mean, I'll be transparent with you. I've never really gotten into screaming metal or anything like that.
Good thing you were at their show and not one of the openers. One of the openers wasn't their show.
Yeah. Most of the of the 6 times I've seen Metallica, only that show probably, as far as openers, was the worst, because like when we just saw them last time they were in Indianapolis, they didn't have an opener except for Jim Brewer. Actually, Jim Brewer was their opener.
Wow.
And then there was the local band when we saw them in Chicago, but then Avenged Sevenfold, which is halfway decent. And then when we saw them in Detroit, it was Avenged Sevenfold and Volbeat, which made me very happy because I was like, I'm so excited to see Volbeat, and they were torn together. So I was like, yes. And then S&M shows, there's no opener. So thankfully I haven't had to deal with crappy openers a whole lot except for that very first one.
Yeah, I would say get ready for this 40th anniversary, because like one of the things that
happened.
Yeah, I mean, they're really all going to be all about their roots, right? So they're going to have people from the early part of what influenced Metallica, which is the new wave of British heavy metal. Now, Motorhead, Lemmy is dead now. He passed away. So, like, he can't really be there. So they'll tribute him. But, like, Glenn Danzig's still alive. They were highly influenced by Danzig. Punk music. There's going to be a lot of probably punk music people that show up.
Jim Brewer's probably going to be there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's anybody's guess, of course, but 40 years is a long time to celebrate, and they're they're over the hill, so they gotta do it now. I mean, tack on an extra 20 something years for each member of the band, right? They're getting up there. This is the sad thing nobody talks about with it's in the Metallica fandom, which is like someday they won't be able to make music anymore. So to enjoy it while we have them.
Just don't think about it.
Exactly.
Until the R word comes out of their mouths, and as if we've learned anything from people like Cher and Elton John, even then the word retirement doesn't mean shit. So
say with the Rolling Stones.
Yes.
They
anyway,
also have
back to Nothing Else Matters.
Yeah.
They've expressed the fact that they somehow they don't like it, and they do like it. The fact that they don't have to release a full album now, like they like the fact that they have the option to release like one song if they want. So that'll probably be what happens as they get older. Is just they'll just start sputtering out one song here and there, and that's fine with me as long as love my Metallica.
Or a little mini EP.
Yeah, exactly. They do love the Ramones, and the Ramones did a lot of EPs. So. So I wanted to ask you, Nothing Else Matters would probably be second for the most accessible song out there. Does anybody have any stories about the song Nothing Else Matters?
Nothing major. I mean, I remember it gets a lot of airplay.
It still does. Like I said, it's the most, it's the probably safest Metallica song. It's the one that like you could be anywhere, like in a grocery store or in a restaurant, where
an
you're going to
elevator.
have a whole mix of people of different tastes in music. And if Metallica is going to play, it's going to be that one because it's just the safest for the mass ears. Because we'll be out places, we'll just, we'll be at like Fazoli's and be like, well, maybe not Fazoli's. I think they only play Italian music, but anyway, you know what I mean. You could be at like
You'll be going down the aisles at the grocery store.
Exactly, but oh, there's Metallica. Nothing else matters.
They're not.
No problem.
They're not gonna play the teeth chattering.
Yeah, you're not gonna hear Master Puppets while you're picking out your produce.
No. That would be something, though.
Yeah. That would be a grocery store I'd like to shop at, actually.
Right?
You would scare the old people. Although I don't know, nowadays the old people, quote unquote, are the ones that started listening to, the hard rock and stuff. They might enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like I said, like I know it from my parents.
Yeah.
So here's another. I was just going to say, here's another anecdote about Nothing Else Matters that might be interesting to you. So this was in 1990 when they were writing this and putting it together. And during the recording process, they actually asked Michael Kamen to put strings to it. Okay, so if you listen to the album, you can barely make it out, but there is a little bit mixed in of symphony in the background, right? But they were a little scared to get that far out as a metal band, right? They were already being called sellouts, and they could tell this album was really departing from that. But they had a version of this song called the Elevator version. They just jokingly called it that, but it's got a lot of strings mixed in, and it's from the early 90s era. But Michael Kamen in an interview talked about how he had worked on them with the song, but all they did was they made the request, hey, Michael, could you put strings to this song? So he did, recorded it, sent it to him, and then he saw him at the Grammys when they were winning their awards. He's like, what the hell? It was years ago when we talked. How did it go? And he didn't hear much of the strings in there, even though he got paid and everything. And they're like, oh yeah, but listen to this. And they played him the Elevator version. And he's like, what? And then he mentioned, hey, we should work together more. This is pretty cool. Lars was like, yeah, let's do it. And then Michael came in, expected to hear from him maybe like that year, like 10 years goes by. And then Lars is like, yeah, we wanted to work with you on that thing that you mentioned. He's like, that was a lifetime ago, Lars. That was like 10 years ago. And Lars is like, yeah, whatever. Let's just do it.
It's now like 1998, early 1999. Like, oh yeah, let's do something. S&M one.
I think he actually said something like Michael's assistant got a message from Lars' assistant and said they wanted to do that thing that you mentioned to them. And Michael was like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, you mentioned you wanted to do a project with Metallica. He's like, that was a lifetime ago.
Well, we're getting around to it now, so clear your schedule.
I thought they didn't want to do it, so I completely forgot.
When Rachel and I were out to watch the S&M 2 show in 2019, I met some people just in a lounge, like just chatting because they were wearing Metallica t-shirts, and I asked them about their origin story, and they said they had actually gone to the first show at Berkeley University to see Metallica when they played with Michael Kamen in 1998 or 99, whenever it was. And I was like shell shocked. I was like, because that was my first kind of love with Metallica was that concert, and I was a little kid, right? I was like, I don't know, maybe 15, and I'm like, I cannot believe you were there. It's like meeting somebody that was actually at the Beatles shows that were like, legendary on like the Ed Sullivan Show or something. So that was I don't know, I was starstruck by fans that were at the show that I liked. Yeah, so then the next song is interesting. It's called Of Wolf and Man. And it tells the story of a man turning into a werewolf. So
yeah,
we just go from...
there's not really any like, oh, I wonder what this song is about, like interpretation. This is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It's about being a werewolf.
Exactly. And the thing about that is James has a guitar with inlays, like pearl inlays in all the frets, and it's literally a man transforming into a wolf all the way up the guitar neck.
Was this song in any way influenced by Kirk and his love for like the Universal monsters and like Wolfman?
Yes, it was. Thank you for saying that. I was going to bring that up. So if anybody is ever at like a half price books and you see a book called Too Much Horror Business, pick it up and take a look at it. It's an awesome coffee table book showing Kirk Hammett's love of all things like classic horror films, and he has this huge collection. And James really keyed in on the concept of a werewolf during this time when writing lyrics. So he used to even wear a die-cast necklace of a wolf head. So I don't know. This is just an aesthetic that comes with the early '90s Metallica era that sticks with me. I kind of like it. I think it's kind of funny. But
it's a fun song. It's on the set list for the first S&M, and I probably would have liked to have this included instead of what's that one song that I'm like, why did they do this for S&M too? That I don't like. Confusion, yeah. I would have preferred this to be in instead of Confusion.
The one thing that really sticks out for Of Wolf and Man is if you guys ever watch these shows from the 90s, Jason Newsted, the bass player they had then that quit in the late 90s, he was a really good crowd pleaser, and he would just holler into the microphone and do like gang vocals and chat like he would howl like a wolf and stuff like that. So like he was a real big presence for the performance of that song. So they don't have him anymore because he quit in the late 90s. So if they would have replayed that, and they haven't played it that much now, it's not a crowd pleaser like it used to be, I guess is where that stands.
I like it.
Yeah. All right. So the next song
for Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, if you search it, they've got a lot of live versions of it. The next song is called The God That Failed. And it's actually, this song is all about televangelists. So I'm sorry, was it Holier Than Thou? Maybe that was the one. One of these songs is about televangelists. And they actually have a music video just showing all the different people on TV asking you for money to save your soul, stuff like that.
Tammy face crying and all her makeup's running down her face.
So James has a very fraught history with his personal religion, and he now has come to terms with it. And it's interesting to watch his songwriting from then and now. It's very different, but he was very resentful back then, as you can imagine, being a person that was abandoned by these parents that couldn't even help themselves, it seems like, because of the way they chose to fashion their life with their religion. So moving on from there, you have My Friend of Misery, which is a somewhat depressing song, but it's got a really great bass solo for an intro. That one always sticks out to me as one I like to listen to in the car when there's a sunset out or something like that. But it doesn't.
You know what they say? Misery loves company. So.
This song doesn't stick with most fans, but I mean, Jason Newsted, the bass player, has a writing credit on this, and he's the bass player. So I don't know. I think this is one of those ones that Jason should be proud of.
It's actually the longest song on the album. It beats Wherever I May Roam by 5 seconds.
Yeah. I don't really have that many anecdotes about this song or the last song, The Struggle Within. They're just kind of, the album's over at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever I listen to the Black Album these days, it's not like Dark Side of the Moon where you have to listen to the whole thing to really kind of get the whole album. I just kind of listen to, The Unforgiven and Through the Never, maybe Nothing Else Matters, and then I hit Of Wolf and Man, and then I'm done. I move on to the next album. I don't spend too much time on the Black Album. I think I listened too much in the 90s with it, so.
It's interesting, going from, cherry picking what songs I would listen to I'll actually listen to an album all the way through. Their choice in the tracks, the order that tracks are in, because I know like when I picked up was it Reload, and I was like, the first half of this album is like badass, and then the second half of the album's just like it's like, you could have kept people more engaged if you just switched around the tracks a little so that people would be like, well, that one was okay, but this next one is really awesome. But yeah, it's like you get through and you get to like A Wolf and Man, and then you're like, well, there's still 3 songs left, but yeah, whatever. Let's just go back to Understand Man.
Lastly, I wanted to talk about a little bit of their like sort of the cause and effect of their career as just a little bit with the Black Album because it blew up so big. And then we can talk about like the hoopla that's going on now about like promoting the Black Album's anniversary and all that.
Anniversary.
The I mentioned the the 80s were kind of wrapping up their thrash underground thing and they were getting into MTV, and then the Black Album, they used a mainstream producer, they got a mainstream sound, and then they made a mainstream hit song called Enter Sandman. Okay. So when they struck out on tour, it was just supposed to be a regular tour in '91, which would have been what happened was they went out. Freddie Mercury had passed away, and they went to England to tribute Freddie Mercury to at his memorial. And during that time, James Hetfield performed a cover of the Queen song
Stone
that
Cold
Brittany
Crazy.
mentioned before, Stone Cold Crazy. They played with what's that guy's name? Tony Iommi. They played with people from Queen. It was pretty famous, because James
Yep.
Hetfield was just tearing it up on stage with his vocals. And anyway, during this time in the backstage, Lars is as their sort of like built-in manager because he's just a wheeler and a dealer. He's back there talking to Axl Rose and Slash from Guns N' Roses. Okay. So he talks them up one side and down the other. They drink and stay up all night, and they become really good friends. And it was because of that tribute show and Lars's sort of wheeling and dealing with Guns N' Roses that they actually formed this pretty amazing lineup of Guns N' Roses and Metallica going out during the Black Album tour. Okay. Well, as they're touring, this is when the tragic accident happened when James got caught on fire by pyro on stage in Canada.
The anniversary of that was yesterday.
Ooh.
People were talking about it on the Metallica Reddit yesterday.
So, yeah, that was really sad. And he burned himself, but he was okay. They got him to the hospital, but he couldn't play anymore. So, John Marshall, his guitar tech, knew all of the songs. He had learned all the Metallica songs on guitar. So, he actually stepped in for James and they continued the tour. Well, Guns N' Roses was a highly dysfunctional band, as big as they were at this time. Metallica was a seasoned touring band. Like they had made all their money from touring pretty much, and they knew that like if you don't play live, you don't make money. So they were like highly
Right.
regimented in their staff to play and do everything. And Guns N' Roses was making all their money from album sales, not playing live. So you had this like very different philosophy and attitude together with these bands that are supposed to be touring together. And like Axel would cancel shows because his voice was bothering him or he just felt bad or whatever. And you have all these people in the crowd getting mad. And they actually like the fans after James got sent to the hospital, they'd only played like a couple songs, and Axel didn't want to go on stage because his voice was hurting him. So all these fans just rioted, just destroyed the stadium, and that was not good. So that was a disaster. And then
Axl
sort of, like-
Rose is a dick.
Mhm.
I'm sorry,
They-
but
Yep,
they
enough
learned a
said
lot.
there.
They learned a lot on that tour and sort of distanced themselves from Guns N' Roses, but they still, Lars still has a good relationship with them here and there. But yeah. And then what was nuts is Metallica at this time, their album was just surging as it was playing in terms of sales. Okay. And it had become a full fledged phenomenon during this debacle with Guns N' Roses. And Metallica started touring and booking like they had in the past, like booking like amphitheaters and like just middle of nowhere. Like we're gonna go to Charlevoix, Michigan, and we're gonna play, this random place in Kansas, and like these places were
this is
filling
where
up. to the
Chauncey
point-
first heard them in the middle of
Yeah.
nowhere, Michigan.
Yeah, in Valdew Lakes. That was during the Justice era. But like anyway, they booked all these and they played those, but they realized at these shows, you can watch on YouTube some of these early shows, the amphitheaters are filled to the brim, and then you have like another 50,000 people outside of the fence trying to get a view of Metallica, right? So you have this phenomenon happening. So then they realize they can easily start selling out stadiums on their own, and we start seeing this transformation. And what's crazy is the record company realized this, and they just basically just kept extending the tour, extending the tour, extending the tour. So imagine you're playing a show maybe twice a week, maybe once a week for 2 years straight, and that's what they went through. Okay, so they couldn't write any songs and record them. They just had like little 8-track recorders, and they were just touring forever. And they're in their late 20s. So I don't know, compare where you were in your late 20s. Imagine becoming filthy rich, but you're chained to this tour bus or tour plane, and you're just playing over and over and over again. So they went through some stuff because of that, and they decided we're going to take a break. We're going to take a break because this is crazy. They all became millionaires sort of in that period. They weren't before. And now all of a sudden it's like, what do we do with ourselves? Because we have this passion and drive. They don't know how to process adulthood pretty much. And they're millionaires. So you get the traditional rock and roll, tropes that come about. And if you study each one of the band members during this time. But anyway, they all cut their hair after this, right? So they all decided, you know what, let's stop being the Viking looking metal band, and let's make some artwork. Just do what we want to do. And they wrote all kinds of music during this era. Like after the tour, they'd taken like a year off, and it became a double album that got released as Load and Reload, which were sort of the core of the 90s. All right. And all the fans that were big fans in the 80s sort of turned on them. Not all of them, but I should say a lot of them. And when I was in school and I talked about Metallica during this time, you would hear a person say, I love Metallica, but I like the old Metallica. You hear that a lot. You still hear this if you talk to some people. And it's just sort of what happened with how they changed. But they introduced a lot of blues guitar, a lot of different kind of technical things that they hadn't done in the past, acoustic guitars. But I mean, honestly, the 90s Load and Reload stuff is great. I love that stuff too. I love it all. But yeah.
I mean, they have to branch out. I mean, it's kind of almost like their garden party. Rick Nelson, he went New York, Madison Square Garden, long hair, played his new stuff. Everybody's expecting the old Ricky from the 50s, so kind of, to mix metaphors, they kind of went through the same thing.
Right.
You have to make music to please yourself, and some fans with them and others didn't, and I'm glad most of them stuck around, and the payoff is there.
Well, what it confirmed for me is these are living, breathing artists that, they pay attention to themselves, they pay attention to the world, and they make art to reflect that, and that's their expression. And that's what I like. Whereas, like, I listened to like the Metallica Big Four shows where they did those in the last 10 years. They played those, and what that is Metallica returning to their roots, playing with Anthrax, Megadeth, Metallica, and Slayer, which are the big four of thrash metal. Well, anyway, if you listen to like Slayer, for instance, it's like, yeah, it's Slayer. It sounds like Slayer, and it sounds like Slayer always, all the way through. It never diverges from that, style, right? And it was because they're writing music for the angsty teenager in the bedroom, and they never changed from that because that's the formula that worked. It's a safe play, and I would be an idiot to criticize Slayer because Slayer fans are ferocious. But like the point I'm making here is that an artist doesn't just choose a formula, right? An artist expresses themselves, and Metallica has done that. I mean, the Saint Anger album that came out in the early 2000s, a lot of people just can't stand that album, and it's one of those albums that was just made based on their expression of what they were doing. I mean, they almost broke up. Like their bass player quit. They had to go through counseling. It was a rough patch. And then, anyway, here we are in the modern times, and they've released, Death Magnetic and Hardwired since then, which were returning to their roots, because they like their roots, and that's why they're doing that. Not because it's a formula that works, but rather they listen to that old school music in their car, not their own, but like that from that era. So why not? It's like me going on eBay and buying toys from the 90s because I want to relive what was fun back in my childhood.
What you mean?
last-
You mean James is kidding when he says our new album? Yeah, it's in your mom's Prius.
Yeah, right.
In the CD player in your mom's Prius.
And lastly, I'll say that about like I got the same kind of response. I was teaching a summer camp with some middle school kids, and I was playing a playlist I have called "Relax 'Em All," and Metallica has a song called "Kill," or they have an album called "Kill 'Em All." But anyway, the point I'm making is the playlist was all like acoustic, soothing style versions of Metallica songs, and these kids were like, "I like this. What is this?" I'm like, "It's Metallica." And then we got talking, and I played some Metallica, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I know this. This is what my dad listens to in the car."
Oh boy.
So I'm listening to dad rock now.
Nothing wrong with that.
There is nothing wrong with that. Especially now, because I'm listening to, I guess would be now grandpa rock, Boston and Kansas, and the stuff that my dad listened to when I was growing up, and listening in the truck,
Mhm.
and that's what I stuck with.
Kansas, carry on away.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to get a vinyl player. Get some of these
Yes,
old school.
Yeah.
I miss
Things
having a
going.
record player.
That's another
I mean,
reason.
it's nice to see the resurgence of vinyl, though. I'm not appreciating the sticker shock.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Well,
though, I
even
must
even
say.
with the reissue that's getting ready to release next month because of the anniversary, Metallica's celebrating, so they remastered the album, and you can order it in various forms, but that includes a double LP and cassette. You could also buy it on cassette. If you
Oh my
want.
gosh.
That's more my speed.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but then there's also the Metallica Blacklist, which is going to be in nothing but covers, 53 different artists covering songs from the Black Album, but all the profits from that are going to go to charity, to their All Within My Hands foundation. But it's like every song's getting covered pretty much multiple times by different artists, which is why there's so many tracks on it. So, and some of those covers have been released because the artist has done a video to go with it. So like Chauncey mentioned, the Miley Cyrus's cover of Nothing Else Matters. The album's out there. Weezer's cover of Enter Sandman, they've put out. They have it out on their YouTube channel with a video. So there'll be more. A lot of the album when they made the announcement, and they were like listing, it was a video that they released, and they're like listing off all of the artists that were going to be involved in this, and I'm like, I don't know who that is. I don't know who that is. I don't know who that is. I don't know who that is, because I think they're all artists that they probably know. But every now and then that one would pop up, that I was like, oh, Miley Cyrus, I know who she is. So Volbeat is doing a cover. Darius Rucker.
That's going to be interesting.
So
Juanes, I think, is doing Understand, and from what I scrolled through, that's going to be an interesting take.
yeah. So
Yeah, if you search on YouTube hashtag Metallica Blacklist, you'll get all of the covers that are coming out that have been released. Do a hashtag them. Yeah. The Volbeat one is out. I don't know if you've heard that one yet, Rach.
I have not. I've seen them share it, but I haven't listened to it yet. So
I'm sorry. It's just hashtag the Blacklist. Or the Metallica Blacklist. Yeah.
But both of those are going to be dropping September 10th, unless you're a Metallica fan club member, and then you can pre-order.
You get the stuff early.
Yep.
Those are your perks.
Yep.
Cool.
Good times. Good times. And Metallica is touring.
Oh, and
so
I forgot to mention, they have a whiskey called Blackened That
Mhm.
is very interesting. There's in the Metallica Metal Up Your podcast, they interview the master or the mixologist or whatever his name is. The what am I trying to say? Master distiller. That's what I'm trying to say. He he explained the process, and it's got a kind of a marketing flair to it, but it is fascinating. They have a room where all these whiskey barrels are aging, and they're blasting the whiskey barrels with like huge speakers with playlists of Metallica that just loop over and over again. So when you buy the whiskey,
Nice.
it'll actually tell you what is vibrating the whiskey casks with the playlist of the songs. So
Wow.
how marketing is that?
Yeah.
How cool.
So like you could be chilling on your deck on a Saturday evening, just enjoying the summer breeze, enjoying the last bits of summer, sipping your blackened whiskey, and be like, I taste notes of oak and hickory and the house that Jack built.
This one's flowery. It tastes like nothing else matters.
Exactly. Or no leaf clover.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean,
True
think
That
about
would be mine.
connoisseurs-
Uh-huh. Yeah,
True
see, I do.
connoisseurs can taste the notes, taste
Yes.
the chords.
Take that, Skittles.
Exactly.
Oh, I forgot to mention, there's been a lot of hip hop albums that have licensed the riffs from Metallica from the Black Album because they're recognizable. You can look up like people who have reused Metallica in hip hop albums, but like one of the most famous ones is in the song American Badass by what's his name? Uh, who's the white trash hip hop guy?
Kid
Kid Rock.
Kid Rock. American Badass has Sad But True in the background. So he licensed that from Metallica it just constantly loops over and over again.
Well, in bits of the chorus of Enter Sandman appears in the polka in Weird Al's album Off the Deep End.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
In his when he always has a polka of like the most popular songs of that time. So
that was another thing. It was at that time, right? So we're in 91, 92, like Nickelodeon was just starting to take shape on Kids Network on TV. There actually are references to Metallica in some of the scripts for Salute Your Shorts, and it was just because of the timing. Yeah, the kids were into the Metallica, so they had to write it into the show because that was hip
going
hip at the time.
mainstream.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think we're all the better for it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Despite what the naysayers may say about them selling out, I think we're all the better for it culturally.
Yep.
It's all water into the bridge, as far as I'm concerned. I love it all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I guess the next time I'll probably be on the show, guys, talking about Metallica will be after Rachel and I see them for their 40th, and who knows what we'll say about then. So
yeah,
Looking forward to it, that's for sure.
Yes.
Be a good time.
let's hope that all things don't get canceled or postponed or anything like that.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
just
Think-
cross your
think-
fingers,
think
everybody. Just cross your
positive thoughts.
fingers between now and December. Can you cross your fingers
Yeah.
for like the next 4 months?
Yeah. I have hope. I have hope.
Me too. I'm keeping a positive outlook.
Yes.
That is what we all need.
Yes.
Well,
There was
so-
another
Go ahead.
my brain keeps coming up with anecdotes that seem to be important. Otherwise, I'll just shut up. But there's-
Tell one more, and then we'll
All right.
wrap it up.
So like there was something going on when they were writing Load and Reload after they made the Black Album, where James was trying to get into country and western style music. So again, I mentioned western on the album, and they even like sort of made fun of him during Load and Reload for trying to make like country type songs. Well, he actually struck up a friendship with Waylon Jennings during this time when they were
Oh,
getting
nice.
popular.
Cool.
Yeah, and going to like the Grammy Awards and stuff like that. He would actually hang out with sort of the outlaws of the old school country and western stuff. So
Nice.
when Waylon died, they actually invited James Hetfield to come perform one of his songs. It's like an outlaw song, but you can see it on CMT on a rerun on YouTube. Like just search for like James Hetfield country music. But yeah, he comes in and screams into a microphone on CMT. So that's pretty cool.
I gotta say, having grown up with country music and being a bit of a fan of Waylon and Willie and the Boys, having a Metallica and Highwayman crossover, that would have been fun.
Yes, that would have been.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's a mythology there that sort of works.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what could have been, right?
Yeah. Well, my mind will fill in the blanks.
Yes.
What is it called? My fanfic. There we go.
Yes.
Yes.
As your fanfic, you've got Waylon, Billy, Metallica, Johnny Cash, Chris Christopherson. Yes, they all.
Yep.
They all throw in some Merle Haggard just for good measure, and we're good.
Yep. Mm-hmm. That would be quite the lineup. Yes.
Yeah, and that would have been competing with the Traveling Wilburys as a super group.
Yes.
Holy
Yes,
smokes.
a super group. Yes. Chauncey, I was just thinking that. I was like, yep, right up there with the Traveling Wilburys.
Now I can't get it out of my head. Dang it.
I was a highwayman.
Well,
Quick, someone who's really good at mixing music. Make us a mix.
yes,
Oh yes,
Ooh,
I have found some really good mixes of songs.
Mashups.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, my favorite one, this is way a tangent. There's one that I love that is Hank Williams Jr. singing a song with his father, Hank Williams. And it's like the editing and on the video, because they have kind of a look-alike, but it's just a silhouette of Hank Williams like singing in like a studio booth recording, and Junior is standing outside singing a duet with his dad, and I'm just like, this is amazing. But yeah. So anyway, if any of our listeners want to come up with a way to mix stuff and share that with us, and we'll play it and like totally geek out over it, or just want to talk about Metallica in general, or anything that you find interesting, send us some feedback. 5ishfangirls@gmail.com is the place to send it. You can also go to the5ishfangirls.com to get links to our social media, our YouTube channel, and all the myriad ways there are to support us. And again, thank you for listening. Thank you for all your support and feedback and all the cool stuff you send us, because you rock. Maybe not the same way Metallica rocks, but you rock just the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Throw the horns, man.
Yeah. All right. So with that, we shall sign off for this week.
This is Brittany and Troy saying goodnight.
It's Chrissy saying goodnight from Salt Lake City.
This is Holly from Wisconsin saying good evening.
And this is Rachel and Chauncey in Indianapolis, Indiana, saying, yeah!
Yeah.
Listening to the 5ish Fangirls podcast. You can find more episodes and information at the5ishfangirls.com. Any and all books, movies, games, and any other forms of media mentioned are owned and operated by the respective copyright holders. No copyright infringement is intended or implied. If you wish to support the show, the easiest way is to leave us a rating and review. More ratings and reviews will make it easier for others to find the show. If you wish to support us monetarily, you can do so at patreon.com/5ishfangirlspodcast. All money goes towards fees and equipment to keep the show going. For official Five-ish Fangirls merchandise, visit redbubble.com/people/5ish Fangirls. We love hearing from our listeners and encourage feedback. You can email us at fiveishfangirls@gmail.com. You can also like and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/5ish Fangirls. Thank you so much for listening, and may the squee be with you.